When we think of a design project, we generally are thinking about the sort of objectness of it. We think about the space that it's making. We think about the materials that we're going to be using for this as a project. But we also have to be thinking about the documentation of all of that information and how that information is going to be understood by other players in this process. There's a lot of other players, right? There's the owner, so they clearly have to understand what it is our system of documentation is representing. We have to make sure that the contractors understand what our system of documentation is representing, because we want to make sure we're getting the right price, we're going to get the right building at the end. But also so do code officials, so do potentially bankers. There's lots of different people, all of whom need to be able to understand the documentation system that you put together. And so that's sort of, clearly a sort of important part of what's happening here. But as we said, one of the key ones here is the idea of code. So the code compliance, this is one of the main aspects of your work in the project. You're coming up with a design intent, and that design intent includes that you are going to make sure that this thing is going to be compliant to all the various codes. Now, there are limitations to how much you need to know about the codes, but the expectation is that any competent architect should be able to provide a design intent where the main safety of the public is being upheld, right? So that the project that you're designing is going to be positive in terms of the health, safety, and welfare of the public. What are we talking about when we talk about code compliance? Well, there's some obvious ones. We're talking about the building code. Right? Well, what's in the building code? That's going to be basic safety issues. So fire safety, material safety, safety in the sense of there has to be reasonable air that can get into all the bedrooms or habitable spaces, that an office building needs to have a certain amount of fan exhaust time so that per hour, so that fresh air is brought into the office. You don't have people passing out all the time. Like all of those kinds of general safety issues, right? That's going to be in the building code. And when we say building code, when we're talking about the ARE, we're generally talking about the IBC, the International Building Code. It's possible that they might bring up one of the other model codes, but in general, the IBC will be what they're talking about. And at this point, most of the codes across the country are either similar to or actually based on the IBC. They're not all, and there is regional variation, but it's reasonably close, and they probably won't get so specific that it'll become too much of a problem. The other thing that we're going to be talking about is the zoning code, right? So the zoning code, well, that one, interestingly, isn't particularly nationalized, right? There are certain things that always run through all of them. You have the idea of some sort of massing control. You have the idea of certain kinds of placement on the site. You have the idea of districts and what's permitted to happen in any one specific district, right? So there's these sort of basic ideas that go across the country, but they might be called slightly different things. They might be arranged slightly different. The sizes of the setbacks will be different in different locations. So the idea of zoning is sort of basically true most everywhere, but it's more individualistic in terms of the community, the municipality, the state, the region. There's sort of different ways that it's done. But like I say, it's pretty similar across the board. But remember, there's some places that don't really even have any zoning, right? So while it's sort of generally true everywhere, it isn't always true, and there is a little bit of wiggle room in terms of that discussion about what is the controlling interest in the zoning. Is that a municipality? Is it by state? What is the one that has the control? And the usual answer to that is it's whatever the more restrictive one is. So in general, the municipalities have much more control about the zoning in their cities. But as you get into sort of farther out situations away from the cities, there's not enough of a bureaucracy of a municipality in order to really have clear zoning control. So then it might fall to the next one, which would be the state, possibly the county, something like that. So there'd be some way that you would have to find the zoning code that is actually in use for that particular site. almost all the time it's going to be through the municipality, especially for the exam. So what's the zoning code care about? Zoning code cares about still the life safety issues, still the idea of the health of the public. It's still all those same basic health, safety, and welfare of the public. It's just that it's a different sort of aspect of it, right? So the idea of density, the idea of creating a sort of positive experience for people that you're using the zoning code. There's certain areas we're going to make very dense and exciting and retail focused, and then there's going to be other areas where it's sort of open and friendly, and then there's going to be other areas that are going to be dense and then works really well with the traffic patterns and the transport systems. And so you're kind of using the zoning code to sort of shape the metropolis, if you will, and they're doing that through having your project meet their zoning code. There's also a whole bunch of specialty codes that you have to be sort of basically aware of. Some might be part of the zoning code. You might have a zoning code that has an overlay to it. So I might have an affordable housing overlay.